Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be doing a recent reads video, but I'm just going to be talking about 4 books that I've read recently or thereabouts that I have given 4 stars. So I think I'm going to be talking about either 4 or 5 books in total, and I will start with the most recent one, which is Before Her by Jacqueline Woodson. This is part of, I believe it is the Amazon Prime read series. I don't know, Amazon Prime seem to do a sort of series where I think the authors writes books specifically for Amazon, and it's just published as a series, and it's just a variety of different authors who do it. So I know there was one which was called like the Forward Collection or something, and they had like Veronica Roth write one, and Kate Jemison write one. So there's all sorts of people, and this one is called The One, and this is the first one in that series. I haven't read the rest. I think I'm going to go ahead and read the rest. I believe all of these books are really short. I can't be too sure, but this one is 17 pages long, so it's legitimately the shortest book that I have read this year. Jacqueline Woodson is an author I have wanted to read for a while. I believe her book On the Bone, I don't know, there was a book that I'm pretty sure was longlisted for one of the women's prize or one of the prizes, not last year, maybe in 2019, and I have her book there for me to read. I just haven't really gotten around to it. So when I saw this was from her, I was like, I definitely want to pick this up and see what her writing is like. Now, I'm not entirely sure about the premise of the One series. From what I read about the blurb about Before Her, I think it's all the authors talking about like love and like sort of personal love to them. The reason I say this is because of the blurb. So it says, Jacqueline Woodson's Before Her is part of The One, a collection of 7 true love stories of friendship, companionship, marriage and moving on. Each piece can be read or listened to in a single sitting with or without company. But then part of the actual bit of the blurb as well is, before Jacqueline Woodson met Juliet, before her own self-realization, there were decades of friends, lovers and family who defined the woman she'd become. In this haunting story of memory and identity, Jacqueline shares the profound impact they had on bending the path of her life, how they formed the dreams of her future, and how each one, some lost, all loved, would bring her to Juliet, her one and only. So yeah, that's what I mean. I'm not sure if the rest of them are going to continue on in that vein, but that's what this collection is about. And really, it's 17 pages long, and it's a series of vignettes, I would say. They're just sort of vignettes about different stages of her life and different things that led her to Juliet, her one. We never actually really find out much more about Juliet other than the first page, because it's like we sort of hear that, you know, she was with Juliet, and then we sort of hear about past lovers, like you've had in the blurb, you hear about past lovers, things in her childhood, things from like being a parent or things like that sort of influenced her and guided her on her path to finding her one. It was really beautifully written. I absolutely loved it. I gave it 4 stars simply because I wanted more of it. It's so short. I really loved her writing, and I think because it was a series of vignettes, it very much lacks the sort of thread sort of tying it all together, and it very much felt like very separate stories, but not obviously all about the same person, but that's what a vignette is. So I just couldn't give it 5 stars because I actually wanted that continuity, and I didn't get that, but I still really loved it. I thought her writing was beautiful. Definitely going to pick up her book sometime this year now. It's even more pressing. And I think there's another book she's written, it's called like Brown Girl Dreaming or something like that, so I think that will also be the second book that I pick up from her. But definitely, I don't know like how you can buy this book basically. All I know is I have Amazon Prime, so I'm able to access it, but I'm sure you can just purchase it. But if you are interested in Jacqueline Woodson's writing, I would definitely recommend like purchasing this and adding it to your collection because it's wonderfully written. The next book I'm going to speak about is The Pisces by Melissa Broder. I am shooketh that I gave this 4 stars. I thought I was going to hate this book, so I read this book straight after I finished a book called You Have to Make Your Own Fun Around Here, which I gave 3 stars. But I was just in a mood where I was just like, do you know what, I haven't given any fiction book 5 stars this year. Like, I really need to find a book that is a 5-star read. And I was looking at my shelves, and I was just like, I don't think any of these are 5-star reads. So I thought, let me pick a read that I think I'm just really going to dislike, and I can just get it cleared from my pile. So I picked up this. I've had like mixed reviews about this book basically, so that's kind of why I was like, I don't think I'm going to like this book. The main thing being about this book that I thought I wasn't going to like is she meets a merman, and I'm just like, pardon? Like, I'm not someone who reads in the fantasy genre or sort of genres where it just involves, I would say, just a lot of disbelief, suspending my disbelief. I'm just not a fan, even though I read a lot of Agatha Christie, and sometimes you have to suspend your belief, but suspend your disbelief, sorry. I was just very skeptical, like these sort of things. I hear them and I'm like, nope, that's a no for me. But I was given this book maybe in like 2019, and I'm just trying to make my way through the stack of books that I have to ease my guilt. Yeah, so this was longlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction in 2019, and I've seen a couple of other booktubers talk about this like in 2019 and 2020. So this is about our main character Lucy, who at the beginning of the book they say at the back she's recovering from a breakup. So at the beginning of the book you find out she's kind of, I think she's 38, she's a bit like unstable in some ways. She's been working on like her PhD for like 8 years, I believe, and just hasn't basically bothered to do it. She basically breaks up with her boyfriend, like goes to break up with him, thinks that he'll just be like, no, like let's not break up. He agrees, and then like she basically starts like mourning him because obviously like even though she wanted to break up with him, the fact that he said yes, she's like, what the hell? So I don't know what town she's in originally. I think she's in Phoenix. I'm so bad with American towns, which sometimes surprises me because I feel like I watch a lot of American TV, especially growing up. But honestly, sometimes they say things I don't know where. I think she goes to San Francisco and stays at her sister's house and looks after her sister's dog. So while she's in San Francisco, she's looking after the dog, like going about her day-to-day life, just trying to like get over this guy. And it's a real mixed bag. She's doing that, but then she is also dating. So you get like sort of descriptions about her dates and the sort of weird things she's doing. It's all a bit weird, and yeah, it's all a bit weird. I'll come back to like the way it's written and stuff like that. And then she meets this merman about halfway through the book, and I thought, right, when it gets to this point, I'm definitely going to want to chuck this book out the window. It wasn't too bad. It really, honestly wasn't too bad, because obviously she doesn't originally know he's a merman, and this isn't a spoiler because it literally says it in the back of the book that when she learns the truth about his identity, their relationship, and okay, maybe that is a spoiler, but I feel like what everyone talks about when they talk about this book is the fact that he's a merman. So she learns he's a merman, and it's more about her sort of finding out. She doesn't really find out until much later, and then I guess what they do, and yeah, how that all ends up for them. I think what got me about this book was I actually quite like the writing. The book very much reminds me of Atessa Moshfegh and like books like My Year of Rest and Relaxation and her other book Eileen. Her character lacks any self-awareness, so she's very self-involved, but she's also a bit like grotesque in some bits. There are like, you know, if you read reviews about this, some people put them behind spoilers, some people don't, but there are some really graphic things in here which didn't disturb me reading them, and I didn't think they were overkill. It just added more to the character and really fleshed her out, and for me it didn't gross me out reading it, but I can see why a lot of people don't like it because there are just like two things in here that I'm just like, it's a bit unnecessary, but at the same time I get it. And I think that's what makes me think so much of My Year of Rest and Relaxation and Eileen, because they're also quite gross characters and they describe really gross things in detail, and it's just a bit like, this is a bit unnecessary. So yeah, the writing was okay. When it got to the merman bit, I actually found that was still okay. It didn't go too much into like a fantasy sort of magical realism element for me that I was just like, I'm so far removed from this. It was still quite grounded in the present, still quite grounded in a contemporary setting that I was like, okay, this is fine. I think what I really liked about this book until it got towards the end and it just sort of was very heavy-handed was the metaphors from this book. I felt like this book was heavily metaphorical, and if you were reading it and, you know, if you were just reading it at a very surface level, maybe you wouldn't get it, but there were so many things to do with the dog and the merman and her sort of thoughts about love that you could see it directly reflected in the way she was treating these things or like mistreating these things. And in the end, like in the last couple of pages, it actually directly spells it out for you and says, and I thought, oh, that's a bit unnecessary, because actually I'd already got that, and I thought actually it was really clever how it was quite simple and not being, it was showing rather than telling you. But in the end she just tells you, like, if you didn't get it, this is basically what it is. And I thought it was a very interesting way to talk about women and their sort of the way they sort of think about love and the projections they have on love, and I don't know, how you treat love when you have it, when you have it in its pure form, and sort of the fantasy love that you sort of think you should be having, and how you also treat that and what that leads you to do. I thought, yeah, there was a lot of metaphors in here, and I think sometimes that actually does get lost in the sort of grossness of the story, which I got, but I see for a lot of people why it isn't worth reading, why it isn't worth like going through the book to find out what we've been thinking like outside of that. I will say there's a trigger warning for like the mistreatment of dogs in here, which for me isn't something that I'm like, oh my god, I can never read a book about this, but I did see like the Goodreads reviews, a lot of people commented about that, so definitely if that's something that you're sensitive about, I would be very careful reading this book, because it's bad. Like, you know, I'm not saying she beats the dog or anything like that, there's nothing like that, but honestly when she's doing some of the things, I'm like, I don't think you should be doing that. Like, you legitimately shouldn't be doing that. Like, she is so selfish, it's unbelievable. I was just like, you can't do that. So yeah, that's very, very sad. But honestly, I was so surprised by this book. So yeah, I gave it 4 stars. I didn't give it 5 stars because it was, for me, like, not a huge emotional connection to it, but I thought on a metaphorical level, I really got it. I really loved it. So yeah, 4 stars for this one, which is a total surprise. The next book that I read recently that I gave 4 stars is The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. Wow, I nearly forgot who that was. So this is a book I feel like everyone has read, you know, it's referenced heavily in pop culture and things like that, and finally I am in on it. I thoroughly enjoyed this. It's sci-fi, but it's quite humorous, it's quite silly, and I think that's why I liked it. It was a perfect blend of all 3 for me, and I loved it. Again, it's not 5 stars just because I feel like I give 5 stars to books that I really emotionally connect with and also enjoy the writing and have other elements that I really enjoy. But if you don't know what The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is about, maybe I'm trying to try and explain it myself, but it might just be easier if I read the blurb, because then like I can't back it up. So I just had a look at the blurb and I don't actually think it's going to be that helpful. So the book opens up with a character, Ford Prefect. No, it actually opens up with our character, one of the characters, Arthur Dent, basically finding out like people are going to like demolish his house. So he's like lying in front of the like tractor or the demolition vehicle, trying to stop them blocking his house. And then his friend, Ford Prefect, I think, comes along and it's just like, the world is about to end, like get up, we need to go to the pub. And he's just like, what? And there's this whole like funny scene of how he basically gets him to get up, and like from there I knew I was gonna like it because it was just very humorous. And he goes to the pub and there was just so many wonderful quotes in there, and he's like literally in the pub like just telling people the world is gonna end and is ordering all these drinks. Anyway, as per the back of the book, back of the book basically says like it starts with an announcement basically telling Earth people like your planet is about to be demolished in 2 minutes, and yeah, that's what happens. We have the pub scene and then we have the announcement and then the Earth disappears, and Ford saves his friend Arthur and they basically end up on the spaceship and sort of like a bunch of other spaceships. and like I guess running simultaneously along this sort of same storyline is another character. I think his name is like, his name is Trillian. There's a scene about like to do with presidency, and he sort of disappears off the face of the earth after this sort of whole thing, active like live televised sort of presidency election scheme in front of people, and eventually the stories merge and you sort of find out what these 2 people are doing. In sort of Arthur and Ford's sort of story, Ford gives Arthur The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which is basically like a story about, or is the book called The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? I think it's called that. So this is so terrible. I'm clearly not the geek that like everyone else is about Hitchhiker's Galaxy, but he gives him the book which basically aims to explain this like sort of new planet he's on. And obviously bear in mind Arthur is from Earth, like he didn't know about any of these things, so it's just like him learning all these new things and just like having to follow along and like interact with all these new things that's going on. And then they eventually meet Trillian, and there's another woman that's from Earth, and like I don't want to go deeper into the story because it just basically ruins it. It ruins the exploration factor of just finding out what is happening in this story because it's just so weird and quirky. But there is a robot named Martin and he is brilliant. He is just very morose, he's a very depressed robot, and I absolutely love him. He just reminds me like so much of a character from Earth. And you just interact with all these different characters and you sort of find out the mission that Trillian is on and what he's aiming to do. And there's a whole section of basically when they come together and they sort of go on their mission, and that bit I don't want to ruin. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it for its, I want to say like simplicity of like traveling into space. There wasn't a lot of like annoying technical jargon that I was going to get lost in, but also it was just very humorous. It was very silly. There's some really funny quotes, and Douglas Adams really blends in a lot of like because in the book they even say it's not just on Earth, but you know, really philosophical questions or just things like, you know, what is the meaning of life, really blends that into the story, and has a really funny play on it. And I just thought it was very interesting. And when the character says, you know, this is not really an affliction that just affects Earth people, like other people on the other planets also struggle with, you know, what is the meaning of life and things like that. It was a really enjoyable book. I want to read the rest because I want to see what happens in the rest of their journey. I don't know that the rest will really compare to the first book. I think there was just the feeling of reading something new, completely new that you haven't read before, and it also being really funny. I find that I don't read a lot of books lately that are actually quite funny, that just make you smirk or make you laugh out loud, and I feel like this book did both for me, so I really enjoyed it and I can't wait to read the rest of the 5 books in the trilogy. Odd, I know. So the next 2 books I want to talk about are both poetry collections, and the first one is Questions for Ada by Ijeoma. I don't know how to pronounce that surname, so I'm not going to try and butcher it. This is actually a book I have read before, a poetry collection I've read before, so I read it first in 2018. And I think then I gave it 3 stars, and I read it again in April, and I gave it 4 stars. And I want to do a video about books that I've changed my rating on, because that's happened a couple of times this year. I really enjoyed this poetry collection, and it's weird because actually when I think a lot of the poetry collections, I read this on my Kindle that I have on my Kindle, I thought about this one a lot. Like, it really, I don't know, I like the title of it and I like a lot of the contents in it. The poetry in it, so I thought about it a lot, and I don't know why, like, I just decided to revisit it then, I guess because I thought about it a lot, and I don't really know why I thought about it a lot. It just stayed in my mind a lot, and I think, actually I just said I don't know why, but I think the reason why it stayed with me a lot is because I don't see it's a poetry collection that is recommended a lot. Yeah, if we're going to talk about poems by like Worcestershire, I hope I'm saying that right, I've forgotten that other person, again, I don't know how to pronounce this, by the Malawian writer who writes Soft Magic. If we're going to talk about poetry collections by them, and perhaps also Rupi Kaur, then I'm always quite astonished that I haven't seen a lot of people talk about Questions for Ada, because they're very much in the same vein, they're the same type of poetry, and they are by African poets. So I think that's why I'm always quite surprised that I don't see a lot of people talk about this. But it says here, the artistry of Questions for Ada defies words, embodying the pain, the passion, and the power of love rising from the depths of our souls. Ijioma's poetry is a flower that will blossom in the spirit of every reader as she shares her heart with raw candour. From lyrical lushness to smoky sensuality to raw truth, this tome of transforming verse. So this is what happens when you speak too fast. This tome of transforming verse is the book every woman wants to write but can't until the broken mirrors of their lives have healed. In this gifted author's own words, I am too full of life to be half loved, a bold celebration of womanhood. And essentially this is what this book deals with. It deals a lot with love, womanhood, self-love, just really standing in your own 2 feet, and a lot of I guess the pressures of being a woman in society, being a woman in Africa. It's a very lovely collection. Like, it's really well written. I think actually what I would say is the first like up to 65% is really good, and then there's a sort of middle bit that I don't really like, where I think the poetry is very simple, lacks any sort of structure, any sort of wordplay, and then it goes back to being good. A lot of them again are very simple messages. Like, if you've read like Worcestershire, Teaching My Mother How to Give Birth, which is the next book poetry collection I'm going to talk about, then I think you will understand exactly what this collection is like, because it's exactly like that but written by a different author, and it's the kind of poetry I like and love. But it's a poetry collection that I clearly loved when I first read it the first time and gave it 3 stars, and I think it definitely was because of that sort of middle part that I talk about. I just read it again and I got there and I was like, yeah, I know I gave this 3 stars. But overall I actually thought it's a really, really strong collection, and if I'm going to give other poetry collections similar to it 4 stars, then I don't really understand why I'm not giving this one 4 stars. I think it's just a wonderful expression of black womanhood, and honestly in so many aspects I cannot fault it. It's very strong poetry and I completely love it. So like I mentioned earlier, the other poetry collection I want to talk about is Teaching My Mother How to Give Birth by Worcestershire. She is like the most elusive author ever. I feel like everyone speaks about this when they speak about her. She was going to attend I think it's the Africa Rights Festival, which was being held at the British Library. I don't know what year this was, and I had tickets to go and see her. I was so excited because I was like, yay, finally, like I had read this already. I think I might have also read another one of her poetry collections, and then she cancelled. She was ill, so she couldn't come, and then I think it was rescheduled for the next year, and perhaps I also had tickets for that, and then like it was just cancelled. So yeah, that makes me really sad. And I know Helena, I always forget what her actual name is, but Books by Ladies said there's a new poetry collection coming out by her. But again, this was a book that I first read, a poetry collection that I first read in 2017, and I reread it again in April as well, just read through it in a day basically, and I gave it 4 stars. So I'll read you a bit as a blurb. It says here, in Teaching My Mother How to Give Birth, Warsand's debut pamphlet, we witness the unearthing of a poet who finds her way through all preconceptions to strike the heart directly. Oh wow, what a blur. And then it just goes on to say that she's a Kenyan-born Somali poet and a writer who's based in London. Born in 1988, she's an artist and activist who uses her work to document narratives of journey and trauma. And again, yeah, she talks about trauma, again talks a lot about Africa, talks a lot about Islam, if you heard, talks a lot about love, and again, I think it's very much rooted in self-love and standing on your own 2 feet and feeling like a powerful woman, which is the similar themes to what you'll get in Questions for Ada. I think the two are very, I wouldn't say closely interlinked, because I don't know if the authors know each other, they probably know of each other, but they have very similar themes, and if you like one, I definitely think you'll like the other. But yeah, I've read those two, clearly quite close together, and absolutely love them. I just read them and thought how similar are these, and just it gave me more of the poetry I was looking for, which is always good. I feel like whenever you like a poetry collection, you want to read more of the same sometimes, and I definitely think these are on the similar vein. But that is it for this video. That is it for the 5 books that I rated 4 stars that I have read recently. Let me know any books that you have read recently that perhaps you have rated 4 stars if you use the Goodreads rating system, or if you use your own, or books, yeah, that you've rated 5 stars maybe. I am on the hunt for my next 5-star read. I cannot believe I've not given any fiction book 5 stars. Like, that's just shocking. And I've read about 65 books this year or something like that. So, you know, it is quite shocking. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I'll catch you in another one. Bye.